So hopping straight into this video, I'm showing you guys how to make my version of birria tacos. So what I'm doing now is I'm prepping a pot and I'm putting canola oil, about 2 tablespoons of canola oil into the bottom, just so I can brown my meat. The cut of meat I will be using is a bottom round, and a lot of people say that bottom round is not good if you're doing this type of meal because it's not gonna get tender, which is an absolute lie. Bottom round is supposed to be leaner than the other types of roast, but this was on sale and my pastor said if something is ripe and permitting, it's for you, and this was for me because it was on sale. So this is what we're using, and it came out really great. So the pot is smoking because I forgot that I had it sitting. I spilled oil, and I guess like I set the bottom of the pot in the oil or something like that on the counter, and it started smoking, but it was okay. So what I'm doing now is I am scooping in 3 tablespoons of garlic into the pot, and I'm just browning it a little bit. And now I'm going to add my washed bottom round roast into the pot with the garlic. So I've learned that it's pretty essential and important to sear your beef off before you cook it, especially roast. Like if you're gonna be making like a pot roast or even like birria tacos, you want to get a really nice sear on your beef because it caramelizes and browns the surface of the meat and causes the crust, which makes an amplified type flavor. So what I'm doing now is I'm seasoning the beef. Inside the first cup that you see me like using to season, I have some I have 3 tablespoons of fine onion powder, not granulated, it's the powder, 3 tablespoons of dark chili powder, 2 tablespoons of Spanish style paprika, 1 tablespoon of seasoning salt, and 2 tablespoons of cilantro lime seasoning. And I purchased these all from Sam's Club. So next, what I have the next cup that I used was the ground cumin, and there is 3 tablespoons of ground cumin inside that bowl. And then after that, I went in with my aromatics. It was just 2 tablespoons of rosemary, or no, excuse me, 2 tablespoons of thyme and 3 tablespoons of Mexican oregano. And I made sure that I seasoned basically all sides of the roast pretty good. I know it seems like a lot of seasoning, but it's not just straight salted seasonings. Like I didn't use like garlic salt and onion salt and stuff like that. I used powders and I used aromatics, and I did use the seasoning salt, as well as you'll see in a minute that I have a broth that I made, and it contains a decent amount of salt. Like you're not going to be lacking for anything. So that bowl that I just showed you guys was the bowl with the Mexican oregano and the thyme in it. And I used a good portion of all these seasonings. I didn't use the full amount that I made. So if you want to cut back on the measurements for the seasoning, you can. But I just did what I felt would coat the meat the most. And so while it's after I seasoned, I went ahead and just flipped the meat to get a sear on all sides. And I quartered the meat because if you put just like a big hunk of meat in the pot, it's going to be really hard. Number one, for it to cook all the way through and to get tender. So I recommend, if you're using like a larger cut of beef, to quarter it. And now I'm just going ahead and cleaning up a little bit. Now that, let me pause. What's inside the cup is 1 cup of water, 2 teaspoons of caldo de tomate or tomato broth, and a tablespoon of chilies and adobo sauce. And I use that kind of as a base, and that's where a lot of the salt comes from. Inside this dish is the caldo de tomate, and I went ahead and added in a half of a white onion. Then I have 2 garlic sticks, 2 whole garlic stick, not why I say garlic sticks, 2 whole cinnamon sticks, and some bay leaves. I used about 4 bay leaves in total. And once that's all combined, you go ahead, I don't know why it's cut off, but I go ahead and cover the meat and the vegetables, or the meat and the aromatics and the onion, with water. All together, including the broth mixture, there's 8 cups of water. So 7 cups of just plain water, and then a cup of the broth that I mixed with the tomato bouillon. And you could purchase the tomato bouillon at Walmart or at your Hispanic store, which is what I did. I went to El Mercado Fresco, and that's where I purchased the bulk of my ingredients. The chilies, the aromatics, everything you need is at those stores. I don't know if you have a fresh market, but you can definitely check in your area. So I'm just showing you guys what everything looks like after it's all covered in the water. And it comes out so good. You want to make sure everything's pretty much submerged, just so it cooks nice and evenly and everything gets tender and absorbed. All the broth gets absorbed by the meat. So after a while, this is about an hour and a half into me cooking, or letting this go like at a low simmer. Some of the water boiled out, so I went ahead and went back in with some water and topped it off, and I switched pots because I turned the heat up for a quick second and some of the seasoning sunk to the bottom and kind of started to burn, so I had to hurry up and switch pots. So this is at about 4 hours of cooking. You see everything is starting to get tender and juicy and delicious. And I did kind of skim some of the fat off of the top, but they said it wouldn't get tender. Yeah, right. Definitely looks tender to me. Look at that. Alrighty, now it's time to go ahead and make the consomme. And what you'll need is, well, what I used was 4 Roma tomatoes. I used guajillo chilies, and then I used chile de árbol. I used 6 of the chile de... No, I didn't. I used 10 chile de árboles, and then I used 6 guajillo chilies. And what I'm doing now is I'm just cutting off the very ends or the tops of the tomatoes, and I'm going to boil those inside some sea salted water, as well as the chilies. So the chilies and the tomatoes get boiled together. And I would say I boiled it for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, just until the tomatoes were soft. And you can kind of tell the tomatoes are ready when the skin starts to peel. So you just plop those bad boys in the water. And I did go ahead and de-seed and remove the pods out of the chilies. Otherwise, they're going to be super duper like hot, or the consomme is going to be really hot. And my kids were going to be eating this with me. So I made sure I did take out as much of the seeds as I could so they would not have a fit because it was too hot. If it was just me, I would have left it in because I love spicy food. But who cares? So what I'm doing now is I am taking out a cup of the broth from the beef, and I went ahead and like put everything on slight super speed so we can go through this process a little bit faster. And I did skim the top of the broth because there was some fat left on top. And this is what I mean. Like, you can't listen to what everyone says. People say that bottom round does not have a lot of marbling and a lot of fat, but yes, it does. And here's my daughter trying to be bossy and tell me what to do. And I went ahead and put gloves on because when I depotted or de-seeded and took the pods out of the chilies earlier, dude, I rubbed my eyes afterwards, even though I washed my hands, and my eyes were burning. So I'm definitely using gloves to shred the beef and to handle the chilies. Look at that. Like, it falls apart just like chuck roast. Like, it splinters just fine. It's super tender. It's not dry. So what I'm doing is I'm taking out the onion that we boiled inside the broth. And I want to blend it up because this is going to be a part of our consomme. Nothing goes to waste. Nothing goes to waste. I think the only thing that was wasted was the stems of the chilies and the tops of the tomatoes. But everything gets blended up together. And I do not have a big blender because I don't make birria tacos often. And I don't really need like a full-size blender because I only cook for me and my kids. But my little bullet worked perfectly to blend everything up. I had to do it in shifts, but you work with what you got, you know? So you just blend the onion till it's smooth, and you really don't have to strain it because there's no parts of an onion that are bulky or that will get left behind, if that makes sense. So I went ahead and dumped that into a bowl and set it aside. And this is the part where I skimmed off the fat that was on the top of the broth. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. And I don't like oily tacos. Like I hate oily tacos. Like there's no need for that. So I went ahead and added the 1 cup of broth to the blender, and I'm going to go ahead and pull my tomatoes out. Any day now. Stir, stir, stir. Don't ask me what I'm doing because I have no idea. Oh, okay. So I took a tablespoon of the chilies and adobo sauce because these have ancho chilies and they also have chipotles. So I went ahead and added a tablespoon of that to the broth, and then I went ahead and plopped the tomatoes into the broth and the chili mixture. Come here, sissy. Sorry, I'm hiding in my closet to do my voiceover because my kids are always crying when I'm doing videos. But it's okay. Come here, Fats. You're okay. So I went ahead and blended all that stuff up. And I did have a strain. I couldn't find my regular strainer, so I used like one from my bowl and made a makeshift strainer and just put my broth inside, like the broth that I had in the pot. I just moved it up to the eye and put it on low heat, and I strained the broth into a new pot, as well as the tomato and the onion that I blended up, just to make sure there wasn't anything weird going on, or someone's not eating a whole piece of oregano, or just something weird, you know, like the thick pieces, stuff that you shouldn't eat. But everything came out pretty smooth, so I think I ended up just, oh no, wait, I think I blended everything at the same time. See, I told you, nothing goes to waste. We don't waste stuff in this house, like not at all. And that's basically how you make the consomme. It's really easy, like really, really easy. Oh crap, I didn't blend the, okay, so I still had 1 tomato and I still had some chilies left over. So I went ahead and took a 1/2 cup of the broth after it was strained and put it inside the blender with the chilies and with the last tomato that I could not fit inside the blender. I think my clips kind of got out of order because I already showed you guys that I shredded the beef, so it's okay. Hopefully it all makes sense. And then I did mix a little water with it so that I could strain it properly after I blended the chilies and the last tomato together. And that is how you make consomme. I can't believe I almost forgot to voice over the chili clip. Jeez. I'm so tired, guys. It's been a crazy month for me. And my consomme was a little bit thick. I should have added some water, but it still tasted really good nonetheless. But next time what I am going to do is probably add a cup of water so it's more like soupy instead of being as thick as it was. And you'll probably see in the clip where I'm actually constructing the tacos like what it looks like.
You're making tacos?
And here I'm just shredding the beef again. And I don't know if you guys seen the clip or if I lost the footage of me straining the broth into the different pot, but I just went ahead, shredded the beef and put it back into the pot, and then I go ahead and mix the consomme with the shredded beef, just like so. Making a mess, but it's all right. Want to get it all married together, and I did go ahead and turn the heat on low. So now it's time to construct. I just have some corn tortillas, and and I will be using Mexican quesadilla cheese. Just waiting for my pan to get hot, and I'm going to warm the tortillas through just ever so slightly. That way they are workable and not as stiff as when they first come out of the package. And you can use flour tortillas if you like, but I think traditionally they're done with corn tortillas. So I go ahead and dip the corn tortillas in the consomme. Then I put them on the griddle and I go ahead and add the quesadilla cheese. And then I add some of the birria. Oh, I went in with more consomme just so that the bottoms don't stick to the griddle, because I didn't want to add any oil, because I don't like greasy tacos. So I just went ahead and oiled the bottom with the consomme, I guess. I put a scoop of the birria, I put a scoop of the pot roast onto the middle of the taco on top of the cheese. Messed that one up a little bit, but they came out okay. And I went ahead and spooned some more consomme on the top. And as you can see, it's a little thick. Next time I'm going to like water it down a little bit, like maybe with just like a cup of water. And this was the finished product. It came out really, 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 really good. So I guess that's all, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.